Hi, this is Jeff. We are going to deal with a topic today that I find fairly often to be overlooked from a controls perspective in an EBS environment, and that is the concept of set values maintenance. So just to give a little bit of background on this, I'm going to start by talking about what value sets are, and then we'll take a look at the control considerations and some of the recommendations towards the end of this weblog. So value sets are used throughout Oracle in the definition of key flex fields and descriptive flex fields that provide a list of values for data entry. So the configuration or the setup and maintenance of value sets are a shared configuration and can be used in more than one key flex field. So for example, you could use the same value set as part of the definition of the asset location flex field or an HR flex field or any other flex field, either descriptive or key in the application, and that could also be shared by the accounting key flex field in the chart of accounts definition. So the issue really comes into what happens in the case where you have a shared configuration, i.e. it's the value set is shared across the application. But even still, independent of that, if you don't have that in your environment, the form itself often gets maintained or gets given out to various different departments to be able to maintain values within their value sets. So the challenge really is understanding the usage of this, the security of it, how it's being used in the variety of key flex fields and descriptive flex fields, who has access to it, and then what controls you have around it. Particularly as it relates to the impact on the accounting key flex field, which is where I find the risk to be most defined. So here's an example of a value set, and this is the value set's form. This is the definition of a value set. This is a department. So in the beginning of implementation, you define various value sets, such as like for an accounting key flex field, a company value set, a department value set, an account value set, maybe some others. This is where you define the parameters of that. This form does have, fortunately, this usages button that tells you where this is used. So if you want to understand what value sets are used in what flex fields, whether they're key or descriptive flex fields, you can find that by going into this form and querying this up. So in this case, this example has a department or value set name of 14 department that's used in 3 different key flex fields. So the maintenance of the values that go in here, so for example, when you say I'm going to set up a department value set and I want to define the values for that, so like department 000 is a corporate one that's not related to a department, then you have like department 100, department 300 maybe sales, department 400 maybe expenses, as so on and so forth. So those, what I refer to as value set values, so the values you're setting up and defining for those actually can be maintained through 3 different functions. It's 3 different functions with the same underlying form. So the function or the function name, which looks like a form to the user, is this descriptive value set values form. The key flex field value set form, and the distinction here is where the find value is defaulted to when you go into this form. You can see this is defaulted descriptive flex field. This one here is defaulted to key flex field. And then the third function, if you will, is this value set values, which defaults the value to value set. So regardless, if you're knowing what you're looking for through these 3 different methods, you can get to maintaining the same values. So these are often contained in a variety of menus throughout the application. So this is a flex field submenu. This happens to be just part of the GL super user submenu, but this flex field submenu is throughout all a variety of different seated menus and seated responsibilities in the application, because this is often part of the configuration of a particular module. So what I see a lot is that either this is intentionally left in a module design from a security perspective, or it's unintentionally left and users have access to maintain value set values when perhaps they're not authorized to. Regardless, for those that are authorized to, it's necessary to understand what the risks are and controls related to this. So we're going to take a look at that next. So just to give some examples here of key flex fields that are throughout the application, this is just the key flex field form, the values, and you can see that each module has a different set of key flex fields. Like assets has 3 asset key flex field, category flex field, location flex field. HR has a variety. GL, primarily you're dealing with the accounting key flex field. So there's, I don't know the number of them, but there's several, 40 or 50 at least flex fields, key flex fields within the context of an implementation. Not all of them are used, but often many of them are used, and they share, in a lot of cases, or some cases, the same value sets. So the risks associated with value set values, they're various. I'm gonna really hone in on one today, but the fact that it's a shared configuration throughout the application, the risks that I note here is those that maintaining the values. The first risk is that they may not be aware that the value set that they're maintaining the value on may be used in different or other key or descriptive flex fields. So there may be an unintended consequence of adding a value to a value set that's used, say used in my example above, the location flex field for fixed assets, and assets business analysts may go in and make a change to that, not knowing that that same value set is used within the chart of accounts to define departments for chart of account values. So the risk is that somebody just may not know what they're doing because they don't know the full configuration of the application. I say excessive access to these forms for employees who are not authorized to make these changes. That's, as I mentioned above, because it's so frequently part of the setup menu, and depending upon how the configuration of the security is done, I have found in often cases a lot of excessive access. Employees have access to this form, one or all 3 of these forms. They don't know that it's there, and it's just excessive access. So from an auditor's perspective, it's a risk that they could go in and make a change to something through these forms, and they're not authorized to make those changes. Third risk is changes are made to a value set that are not authorized, that they're not authorized to maintain. So, for example, an accounting or an HR employee adding a value to a value set pertaining to the chart of accounts. So it's that kind of that cross-departmental risk of employees having access to this. Now, the other risk, is just that those that have valid access can go in and make changes to this that are not authorized, and of course that's a risk you always be concerned about. And that's not really as concerned about that for most organizations because there's usually a well-defined process. For example, adding a value to a chart of account segment, and those that have access to that for that particular purpose are trained and skilled and understand the impact of that. So that's a relatively low risk. So the point really here as you get into the understanding the risks and the controls is you really need to have a discussion with management and both IT and functional management on the risks related to the data. And oftentimes what I find is in a chart of account value, this is the segment values or value set values related to the account for chart of accounts. When you bring this issue up to the accounting department or a CFO or controller or director of accounting, and they find out that employees in other parts of the organization have access to maintain these value set values, they want to mitigate some of the risk. So the reason, there's a variety of reasons within the general ledger department or accounting department of why these are critical, and primarily it's to maintain them in the integrity of the financial statements and make sure that things aren't being booked to places where they shouldn't be, and to make sure that the financial statements don't get distorted in any way. So in this particular example, if you have this segment values account, you can see that there's some critical values here within the segment qualifiers. Allow budgeting, allow posting. The account type is absolutely critical. That drives the automation of the close of the general ledger, the chart of accounts at the end of the year, since P&L revenue and expense accounts get closed out to retained earnings or the equivalent of retained earnings. So from a controller's perspective or CFO's perspective, they really want to keep tight reins on who can maintain these values. There's certainly implications. Every time you add something to this, you need to look at potentially security rules, cross-validation rules, FSG row set issues, and then if you have other systems like Hyperion that are also integrated with the Oracle General Ledger. You may have to look at some other configurations within those. So usually it's a very highly skilled person in the accounting department that maintains those values, and because of the sensitivity and nature of the data, the accounting group typically does not want anybody in the organization to have access to those. So the other thing I will note is that I have seen in many cases where organizations have deemed the maintenance of these value set values or the chart of account values as a key control from a Sarbanes-Oxley perspective. And I generally don't recommend that. I think that most organizations have sufficient mitigating controls that would catch something if a value was added to one of the chart of account values or value sets unintentionally or intentionally for whatever reason. So those mitigating controls often come into entity level type controls, such as the financial close process, flux analysis, the balancing of the income statement, or the roll forward of the income statement to the balance sheet, the balancing of the balance sheet itself, those type of things. So having said that, I think it's still important to maintain some controls related to those particular values, and certainly is important so you have a more preventive control as opposed to relying upon detective controls. So unfortunately, within the context of those forms, Oracle doesn't allow you to secure those. It would have been nice if they'd included that value set values form in the context of the definition access sets that they rolled out in R12, but that wasn't a part of the context of that form. It would have been perfect functionality to do, and maybe they'll consider doing that in the future. But the only solution, there's two solutions. There's a preventive solution and a detective solution. A preventive solution would be the underlying form doing a personalization, which in essence is doing a conditional restriction to the list of values based upon certain responsibilities, i.e., you have the company value sets maintained by a GL support person. You have value sets related to HR, maintained by an HR IT support person. You have asset location value sets maintained by fixed assets. To the extent that they were shared, and particularly they were shared between a key flex field or descriptive flex field in conjunction with a chart of account. So like shares like department between the general ledger, the accounting key flex field, and another key flex field, like I was saying, maybe the asset location key flex field or something like that. Certainly most CFOs and controllers would want that to be controlled within the accounting group as opposed to in another group. So another option, a plan B for this, is a detective option, which would be deploying some type of trigger or log-based auditing solution that would create a before and after value of all changes, or it would create a list of all inserts when you're making additions to those. And that system can be reviewed by the accounting department to make sure all changes are properly authorized. So in conclusion, maintenance of value sets is a shared configuration. You should make sure that security is well defined so that only authorized users are able to maintain those values. Risks should be discussed between IT and functional management, and then more often than not, you need to look at either preventive or detective control like we discussed. So hopefully this is good information for you. I'm going to wrap up. If you've got any questions on this topic, please feel free to contact me at the email provided there. And then just one other comment is here's some screenshots of the functions: flex field values, descriptive flex field values, key flex field values. Have a great day.